I think that has like that can confer a lot of the same benefits as just general like trying to be more mindful, trying to be more present, and it can do it a lot more rapidly if you do that like in a safe therapeutic setting, right?
Mm.
But there's always potential for misuse, especially just doing shrooms in your basement with your friends. That's is that going to confer long-term psychological benefits? Probably not.
Welcome to Metaverse Degen. I'm lying.
I'm Old Man Raptor, and we got one hell of a guest here, folks, and you are.
SkyeBeat, the Space Fox.
Hey, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, very much so. Wait a minute. You said. Wait a minute. He said space, right?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Okay.
I did.
I
You
won't
heard
go.
correctly.
I won't go there because I have a lot of space between my ears, and we're all foxes here, so it's going to be a little weird. So hold on, folks. It's going to get nuts.
Oh, well, with that said, let's start with the meat and potatoes of the conversation. What are you most known for? How'd you get started, and what pulled you into VR?
Yeah, so I guess in VR I use much more as an artistic platform, I suppose. VR is where I come to make music and do my 3D modeling and yada yada, all that. It's a great avenue for performance. But I mean, I rant about space enough that I feel like I'm kind of known for that as well, because I'm an astrophysicist outside of all of this. What pulled me into VR? That's a funny one. I think we could start with that because that is a. So originally, the monolith that they found in the Utah desert like all those years ago? It's like 2016 or
Yeah, I
something
think
like
so.
that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. There was a clip I saw of a bunch of furries chilling around a VRchat recreation of that. And I had been a furry since middle school. And for some reason, that was what made it click in my mind that, oh my God, I could be a furry in virtual reality too, if I put my mind to it. And so I just kind of made it my mission from there to save up for a headset and start doing that. It wasn't actually until like 2021 when I started, doing it. Um, and I originally kind of used it as the social tool, just sort of a way to actually get used to interacting with people because I was very much a bit of a shut-in throughout high school and early university and all that. And VRChat was my way of testing out ways to be social, and it worked because I feel like I am much more sociable and personable in real life now.
Mm.
But at the same time, like I was making music as well since the beginning of high school with that, and I feel like my music has also very much expanded in terms of scope and like along with that, with my social opening up, my blossoming,
Okay.
my hippie
Sky,
look, if you will.
Sky, what was the weirdest thing you ever saw when you came into VR?
The weirdest thing I've seen in VR? Oh man. Um, I feel like anybody who's played this game long enough has a substantial laundry list of stuff that they've seen that's just like, on kind of par for the course. Um, I suppose, I mean, the very first thing I saw when I got in here, like the literal first thing, like putting the headset on for the very first time and Quest Standalone was going to FurHub and then turning around and seeing some guy laying right next to the spawn on the floor with his legs spread open for his friend to inspect the thighs on the new avatar that he just acquired. And the two of them were talking about it
Oh my
very like
God.
intimately and but loudly. And I don't know. That's like I feel like it fit the bill perfectly. Like I knew what I was getting into, and I'm like, yeah, this is VR chat. That's what I thought it would be. I didn't have any exposure to the platform before that.
If they were at the spawn point and everything else like this, and you come and if you being like me, being small, you feel like you just been crapped out of somebody's legs. If he was laying there with his legs open, you're going, God damn, watch that first step. coming out of it's a real bitch. It's the lump you got to work around if you get my drift. Oh my God, I'd be saying some stupid shit with that. Because you know how it is. Don't get me wrong. When you get into VR and you hop in, and it happens, you get somebody that stops at the stopping point, and you got to walk through them no matter what the ordeal. But can you imagine walking away and then you turn around and you look back and you saw that like what you did? The first thing I would want to do, and don't get me wrong, and I catch hell all the time, is going, wow, I wonder if Furry Hideout is going to come out with a shower so everybody can take one, because look at where we just came from.
Yeah. Hey,
Well,
we're thankful it's VR, I suppose,
indeed.
so we don't have to
Yeah,
deal
no
with the
doubt.
smells. I think about this a
Push
lot,
your
honestly.
luck.
Oh.
Push your luck. It'll be the next thing. You buy a headset going, oh, great. Okay, Billy over here crapped his pants. Yeah,
I hope
wish
I
you
don't.
just.
I can't foresee that being a feature that is like forcibly implemented that you can't say no to on a headset. I don't think people are gonna buy that personally, but I could be wrong.
Oh no.
Funny you say that. I remember it was like 2 years ago. There was a tech that was supposed to give you smell in VR. It was like a series of small tubes that sat connected but the same place a mouth tracker would be, and it would just mist your nose with whatever unholy creation someone digitized in wherever you are.
That's just so uncomfortable. Like, it's not. I don't know. That's just unnatural and weird. Like those are artificially created smells that you're just like blasting into. Like it's different kind of sensory input than like shooting photons at our eyes. You know.
Fair point.
Someone that goes into it.
Well,
hey, Sky, you want to smell my flower? What's it smell like to you? You
Yeah,
really
see, there's
don't
also
wanna
the
know.
there's
Yeah,
also the
you really
danger of
don't.
like that happening, and you know, like
Uh-huh.
the misuse potential. I think outweighs.
Yeah, no doubt.
Oh, hello, nice to meet you. Here's my smell. No, but
Yeah.
so what you mentioned you do music and you learned earlier on. What got you into playing music, and what was your interaction with music here in VR as well?
Uh, so starting music, beginning like very originally, I was sort of passively interested in guitar like all my childhood. I just thought it was cool, and I didn't really have like a preferred genre as a child. I just sort of liked music, and my parents ended up getting me a guitar for Christmas. I think it was 2014, 2015, it was when I was pretty young, middle school, I think, and I did not have the resolve to just knuckle down and learn it at that time, for whatever reason. Busy, distracted, yada yada. It came with a game for the PS3 called Rocksmith. If anybody knows what that is such a fantastic and fun way to learn guitar. It's still great to pick up. It's essentially just Guitar Hero but with a real guitar. It comes with a cable that you plug into whatever, and you can mod it on PC, and it's brilliant. But yeah, that's how I learned. So like I gave that guitar away to an aunt for a few years, and then a couple years later, I saw a video of a friend playing guitar on Facebook, and I asked for it back because I was like, I want to do that. I don't know why that specific video of him playing some Guns N' Roses song, and I really like Guns N' Roses, um, instilled me with like that motivation, but it did, and I took advantage of it. It was the summer, I didn't have much to do, so I locked myself in the basement and learned how to play guitar. And that was 12 years ago now. Um, and I always sort of treated guitar specifically like sort of a musical means to an end. I was interested in learning it for the sake of writing, and just sort of making noises, like expressing myself, I guess. I didn't really know how to necessarily express that in the beginning as like a someone trying to learn, but over time, I feel like that's kind of what my musical goal is. I really enjoy learning instruments. I picked up a bunch when I was just in high school band in general. I was always hopping around in jazz band to cover whatever was needed. And I really like learning new instruments and incorporating new things just for the sake of like expressing new ideas in novel ways. And VRChat is a really great medium for that because there's a lot of open-minded folks around who are here to have their minds assaulted, sensory assault and all that stuff. And it wasn't until a couple years of me actually playing VRChat that I realized more seriously, like, hey, there is like a space for people who like perform metal and do play guitar and stuff in VRChat. Like, it is there. People watch. Like, there is an audience. This happens. I've just been kind of in the dark about it. It was last Virality where I actually saw Bird Satan perform for the first time while I was tripping on something, and I that just like overhauled my motivation in that moment to be like, you're a musician, start acting like one, like get back into this. Because I wrote a bunch throughout high school and I was really proud of it because I got all this positive feedback from people around me. And then, I kind of got into university and physics became the most important thing in my life. And not that I'm not passionate about astrophysics, but it very much took away time from being a creative human being, which I really value. And so, I don't know, seeing a metal performance at a virtual furry convention like that really inspired me to start pushing a little harder and actually get into performing. And so I ended up introducing myself to Bird. We're pretty good friends now, as well as there's a bunch of others who play guitar, and I'm really happy that I know all of them because we all share musical ideas and collaborate, and it's a really productive and awesome environment. And now I've given a couple performances, and I'm looking forward to doing more because I'm getting into like experimenting with generating live visuals algorithmically directly from my backing tracks and all that. And yeah, it's been really fun so far. I really like making music with people.
Hey, Sky, what artist really catches your attention? Not just in VR, but in real life. Yeah, who's your mentor? Who's your mentor? I can't say the word because I'll fuck it up and bury it in backyard. But the person that gives you that not to say, hey, I want to be like him, but I like his method, and you're really zoned into it.
Yeah. So specifically not in VR.
Yeah, no. Well, both. Hey, what the hell? I don't give a shit. Both of them. Well, you got one in VR.
No, I guess that's true. I guess that's true. You know what? Yeah, you know what? Yeah, it's true. Humans are humans. That's a fair point.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say that. Yeah, people who really led me through the process. I was very reliant on myself, I guess, growing up as in like a small town. I don't know if I can really think. I guess there was I had two other friends that were learning how to play guitar, and I had some other musician friends in high school that sort of played guitar and bass and drums, sort of as a bit of a side thing. And so there was a bit of drive to like improve in the sense of I want to be better than these people. And like, does that sound maybe narcissistic or selfish? I don't know, perhaps, but that is your motivation for learning things at that age as a teenager. And, yeah, and then I sort of grew into the whole like recording myself more seriously when I started learning how to I got into recording more seriously, I guess, around high school, right? So I started playing guitar around late middle school, and I started learning how to record and mix better around like middle of high school, and that's when I started to get that positive feedback from not just my peers who I was directly playing from. I feel like that was very much side tangenting.
It's okay.
But Actually, well, okay, that does lead into, I guess, like where you get my next big source of inspiration, which I think it is honestly going to be some of the people that I met in VR along the way who also are musicians up until now, which are Satan, big one, and Leica, who is currently working on some music of his own. Both of them are guitar players primarily that do kind of similar stuff as me in Vrchat, or performing and make progressive metal and all that. But we all have something figured out that the others don't. And so having that communication with each other to like lift each other up emotionally where we're deficient in other ways has been incredibly helpful. Because I don't really think I can honestly point to like a single artist who's like mentored me per se, as in like given me advice or led me along. I think I've always very much been uh, exploratory. I like to experiment and make weird noises and see what sticks. So yeah,
Okay. So
I guess it's more so influential community members, I suppose, that are close to me.
okay. I have a question for you. What is some of the first music that you recorded that you were proud of, and what inspired it at the time?
Mm. I think so. I have an album. So okay, so the very first album I ever recorded is scrubbed from the internet. I'm not proud of it. It's bad. It's a My Little Pony themed deathcore album. It didn't need to exist, but I guess I gained valuable experience going through the process of writing and recording it. Uh, but after that, the album after that is where I sort of mellowed out. I was originally going to do all this black metal and like harder like deathcore stuff, but I decided to go into more of a progressive metal direction because I liked I don't know, I just like the sort of nuance that you could have with all like how dynamic music tended to be in that genre. And so I started going to that. Um, sorry, what were we talking about?
What was some of the first music that you've made that you're
Right,
proud
right.
of?
Sorry.
Okay, it's okay.
I do that a lot.
It's okay.
Yeah, music that I'm proud of. Okay, yeah. So the album after that, I started getting into progressive metal. Doing that, recording that. That album was called As Blood Runs Black. It's a very edgy name for a not very edgy album, honestly. It's pretty tame. Most of it, I'm not a big fan of. There's a cover of Megalovania off of it. That is my most played song on Spotify still. That frustrates me. Uh, I hate looking at that. But there's another song on that album called Seru, I Hope, which was the first time I felt like I wrote something that was like an emotional, like a proper expression of like something I was feeling, as opposed to like this is something that I wrote and sounds good, like viscerally.
Mm.
It's the first time I let like my emotions kind of take the wheel on on writing something. And I had a little music video for it and everything, and it was just me like playing it in the park. I was 16 years old, uh, but I'm still kind of proud of that because I don't know. I put a lot of effort into that, and I really sort of stuck it out there. You know, like that was my first experience doing that, and so I'm proud of that. And I wanted to do more music like that on my next stuff. So yeah, I'd say that song specifically.
Okay. So with that song specifically, as among others, what inspired them? Especially the My Little Pony deathcore album. I'm curious
Yeah,
what
I
spawned
want to hear
that
the Little Pony one, man. I want to know what brought that up, man. I want to hear that.
Yeah. So I don't have either of you heard of Prince of Whatever, the artist?
I have not.
Okay.
Who was it again?
Prince of
Repeat that.
Whatever. He's a
No, I have
yeah.
not.
No.
That's okay. He's from the Brony fandom back in the day. He was a metal musician. He did much more like metalcore type stuff. A lot of hype, a lot of crowd shouting type. You know what I'm getting at, that kind of music. Um, but I was like, why? Because I was a brony before I got into the furry fandom when I was young, middle school, and I was like, well, shit. If there's space for this, then why not go more extreme? I'm sure there's a niche for that, and so I just immediately went to like deathcore, and I was really in the brony fandom, so let's do it. Let's go whole hog. And it was called Flay the Coat. The EP. It was 5 songs, and they weren't great. None of them. The vocals, especially, were atrocious, if I do say so myself, because it was me just screaming through my practice amp. Because I didn't have any like interface or like mic preamps or anything like that. I had a shitty $20 dynamic mic that I got for Christmas, going through a practice amp that was going into my computer through USB that I would just scream into, not even using headphones. And that was where it started, I guess. That was the early stuff. But moving on into the more like, emotionally nuanced progressive metal that I'd like to think I'm able to write now. Maybe me calling it, maybe that was incredibly emotionally nuanced, the My Little Pony deathcore. Nobody will ever know. But from then on, I started to take more like, I don't know, I tend to write very like poetic, abstract, like rearticulate. I tend to take my inspirations and I write about them in very like poetic and abstract ways because I write mostly instrumental music. Um, so, I'll have something that's like vaguely inspired by a notion of some emotional experience I had, for example, but I know that that's not obvious to the listener, and so I kind of like to leave things open for interpretation. In the case of like Seru, I hope, I think if I recall correctly, that one was inspired by some relationship stuff I was going through at the time, and I was like, fuck, I don't know, let's try writing music. Like I hear people write music when they're stressed to get it out. So let's try this. That was literally my motivation for trying it at the time. And it worked. I was like, wow, I do feel better. Wow, that like feel like that melody that I came up with resonates with me, in the exact sense of what I am feeling, right? It has somehow captured some piece of my lived experience, which whether or not that's actually true, I can't say. Like I said, it's up to the listener to take their meaning from it. But in that sense, that's kind of where all my music comes from now, honestly, is taking some idea. Either it's usually an emotional experience I've had. Star Breath, my last album, was mostly inspired by space, actually, different concepts in space. Um, but the stuff that I've been working on recently, Tales from the Neon Jungle, the album I'm working on now, is inspired by different psychedelic experiences I've had, as well as some time I've had just in the furry fandom and VRchat, because those things are sort of linked. And yeah, I guess it's drawing from personal experiences and writing about them in poetic ways because I know that the listener isn't going to necessarily be able and leaving it open for interpretation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sky, if you had the opportunity, what's your favorite? What if you had the money in your hand? What guitar would you wish you could have?
Oh, well, I have it on my avatar, so I suppose we could just turn this on real quick. A Strandberg, it's a headless 8-string, one of these. I own something similar. I'm not quite rich enough to own a Strandberg, but I love headless guitars. I love headless 8 strings. I'm a huge prog nerd. I'm a huge snob about that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Okay. So it sounds like over the years of the music you've written that things have evolved differently over the years. What changed? What caused the evolutions from what you started with into progressive metal, and then into space, and then into what you're doing now?
I think a lot of it comes down to like just becoming a more open and generally, I don't want to say chill in the sense of like being egotistical, but I have chilled out a lot since like high school. Like I was a very uptight, serious person sort of around that time. Um, and that's when I wrote like just straight prog metal. And well, like I, started with the black metal, went to like just straight prog metal. Now I'm getting into all this weird genre fusion stuff. But I feel like it's mostly coincided with me just opening up as a person and becoming more sociable and becoming more open to new, just general experiences. Like I love just experiencing people's like creativity. Like it's a very like broad sort of philosophical concept to try and convey, but just I love like when human artists like put their heart and soul into something, even if I might not necessarily agree with it, the fact that we have the ability to convey our emotions through different media, music, visual art, all that stuff. It's very uniquely human. And because that sort of contrasts starkly with me being a physicist studying an objective reality that I believe exists, I think it's like really important to keep that, subjective human side
Hmm.
in check. Not in check, but like give it adequate room to breathe, as well as respecting the fact that we live in an inhospitable universe.
Okay. So, may I ask what caused you to want to pursue physics and astrophysics?
Originally, I just thought space was cool. I was walking home from a friend's place one night after playing D&D, and I looked up at the sky and I saw the stars, and I was like, it's really fucked to think about how far away all those things are. And I was good at math, and I was like, well, let's give this a shot. Why don't we? Originally, I was going to go into jazz studies academically, because that's when I was, that's when I was starting to get more into guitar around that time, and I really liked music. And then I realized there's not really much of a job market for this, and I want to make like metal, like heavy music and all this weird stuff. And I don't know if like a degree in jazz performance is really gonna mesh with that like long term. Like it's just gonna kill the passion for me. I don't want to be doing that for the rest of my life. But so we decided astrophysics instead. That was the next best alternative. And I kind of fell in love with it from there. I learned to analyze the world in a much more critical, uh, objective way. And for a while, that was like kind of that manifested with some negatives in my personality. But like I said, giving that subjective human experience more breathing room, I really appreciate the experience that I've gained so far.
Hmm. When you first started pursuing physics and astrophysics, what you do now, what were you expecting it to be like versus what you experienced after going to college and all the stuff you've done?
Right. I don't really know what I was expecting when I got super into it. Like I'd seen like a couple like research papers like that my high school teachers showed me, and I didn't really understand what the hell I was looking at. But I just thought, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess to some extent it is quite a lot what I expected because it's a bunch of people arguing about shit that we don't understand, but in smarter ways, and trying to like justify themselves. So I was right on that part. Like, it never stops. Humans just love to argue over shit. But it did show me a much broader spectrum of humanity than I was accustomed to. Uh, Academia attracts a lot of extreme personalities, especially once you start getting to like, the high tier of it, once you're all graduate students and professors, people who actually really want to pursue something like that. And there's a lot of interesting characters you meet. And they impart a lot of interesting advice on you. There's a lot more It's a lot more of a social game, honestly, like making connections and all that. But I mean, I don't think I needed to be the one to break that to everybody. But yeah, I didn't really expect that. But I feel like I'm good at that.
Okay. So the academia is more who you know, not what you know.
It's a bit of both. I think it's a lot of who you know in terms of like it's I guess that's the stressful part. It's a both. It's who you know, it's what you know in terms of getting into anywhere, but it's who you know in terms of getting invited to apply to anywhere.
Mm. Okay.
It's a bit of it's stressful. You get overworked a lot. Actually, I guess I wasn't expecting that. Just how much work gets piled onto your plate and how much extracurricular quote, like how much stuff that you're not told about that you're just gonna have to kind of deal with, like administrative bullshit, a little bit of paperwork here, there, a little bit of yada this, go do this, get odd tasks. 'Cause when you're a professor, or even as a graduate student, I'm starting to having to deal with all these dumb administrative emails and like I'm a teaching assistant now, and I have to hold office hours for students, and I have to mark, and there's all these small responsibilities that add up. Um, that you can spin this any way such that it looks like a 40-hour work week, but that's not like reflective of how much time you're actually putting into, you know, what you do. And that was something through undergrad that I honestly had to like detangle towards the end, was like, Jesus, I'm so like used to functioning like this, like in this really stressed out state that it's damaging my ability to form like social relationships because I'm so judgmental. And
Mm.
so that was something I had to work on a bit coming out of undergrad.
Mm. Okay. Was it these experiences that led you to make the second album, the one themed on space?
It was sort of, yeah. It was that album itself took quite a long time to make, so it's only 5 songs long. It's not very long. It's like 27 minutes, I think. Um, but it took like 2 years to make, and it was originally supposed to be like 12 tracks, but I was just fluffing it up so much that I was like, okay, I'm literally never going to finish this. I have 5 of these that are almost done and I think are better than everything else. So I'm just gonna release these. Um, but yeah, that was inspired. Yeah, that was inspired mostly by what I'd learned, honestly, because I am still very passionate about physics, and like the things that you learn in academia are, you know, invaluable. I think learning to think critically and analytically and objectively like that is a very good skill. And so I wanted to express that a bit more musically, but there's other parts of academia that are less pleasant.
Mm. So, with the 5 songs you chose, what were you trying to portray from what you've learned, may I ask? Were they themed at all, or just like generalities?
So they were sort of they were quite general. The first one, The View, is supposed to be about so the original story that I had in my mind for this when I was writing it, and I didn't really write these down, so I guess this is the first time I'm actually kind of expositing this, is some unnamed protagonist makes a getaway, escapes from some planet that they're being held on, and for the first time ever, they're seeing just how massive things in space actually are. Because they're on a ship and they have the ability to actually look. It's been a couple days and they're away from their planet and they can look around and like, holy shit, what do you see? This is how big everything is. It's like mind blowing, like panic attack inducing. That's right where that chorus comes in, or that bit in the middle, that sort of heavy bit. And then We the Void transitions into a bit more of a like acceptance of the fact, like everything is really big, and so that song has a lot of wide intervals and space, like harmonically throughout to sort of try and convey that. It has a lot of breathing between like quiet sections and very, very loud sections that have a lot of really dense extended harmony. And so that's sort of my attempt to convey, that idea, as well as just random grooves that I thought sounded cool. I always think it's important to let the instrument do a little bit of the writing whenever you come up with anything. Give it a bit of character. Just think like, oh, that sounds cool. Like it doesn't need to necessarily have cool artistic meaning to you. Then so there's that. The next song, Cosmic Drive, is supposed to sound like, again, turning to the kind of spaceship theme. Cosmic Drive is meant to sound like a ship that's malfunctioning, and everybody is desperately, like the crew is desperately trying to keep it intact because they're out in deep space. And so the chorus for that one, which repeats a couple times, has a lot of high guitar tapping, which is meant to mimic the sound of an alarm going off, and stuff like that. And then that transitions into Star Breath Inhale, which is Star Breath Inhale and Exhale, which are the last two songs. They go together, and Inhale has lyrics, but it's a lot more philosophical, and the lyrics were collaborative between me and someone else, and I never got the actual like meaning behind the lyrics that the other guy wrote. I wrote like half of it, and he wrote the other half like in the gaps. And so what I was kind of going for with those songs was again more like acceptance of how massive things are, and also how slow, like how transient everything is, but how like it evolves on incredibly long time scales and looks slow to us, but galaxies, for example, are not static objects. They are very impermanent, and they're constantly flowing and merging and yada yada. And so those two songs sort of speak a bit more to that. There's a reference to like the tail of time swaying, as in because it's a giant foxtail, because why not? There's a lot of references to like very grand like cosmic time scales and like, large things in the lyrics. And as well as Star Breath Exhale, it also has a lot of that sort of wide harmony, and yeah, that's kind of what those ones are conveying, I suppose.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that, by the way. You saying that
Yeah.
brought a question to my mind. You said earlier that you first thought about space was when you looked at the stars and said, I want to give this a shot. What did you find then versus what did you find out about space with that same mindset when you got into it in college?
Oh, you thought you were here for e-girls? You thought f***ing wrong. You're here for Hash Studios. Sick of tools that break more than they work? Or needing a computer science degree just to make an image show up in Unity? Worry no more. At Hash Studios, we have prefabs for everything you need. Megaphones for those world-shaking announcements, pop-up menus to keep out the less fashionable avatars from your club, and a band menu that lets you handle any unwanted guests. Hash Studios prefabs. Available now on Gumroad, Booth, Jinxie, and Payhip. Get yours, or live with regret. Ooh. I hate that. I actually want to die.
What do you mean exactly? Sorry.
Well, when you looked at the stars and said, I want to give this a shot, seeing how far away things were, when you were getting into learning all of that stuff, what were you thinking as you were finding more about space over time in college?
Right. Okay, I see. That's a good question. I think I think my experience really drilled, like my entire experience up in academia, like if I can summarize it all, like up until now, it's that humanity doesn't know shit. We really don't understand anything about the universe we live in, and it's somewhat existentially like terrifying to like come to terms with that, but I think it's also a good thing to come to terms with because it kind of softens your worldview a bit. It makes your mortal issues seem a little less important. But to be more specific, we the universe, like my whole studies in physics, right? Because that's what physics is. It's the study of essentially unraveling the source code of the universe. That's how I romanticize it in my mind to motivate myself a bit more. It's so innumerably complicated that there is no guarantee that we will ever fully understand everything there is to know in terms of reality, like physical processes, things that objectively exist. And by objectively, I mean we can all like write down an equation that predicts some behavior that we agree on unambiguously. That's my sort of definition for objective reality. Because I can't exactly prove that everyone is conscious or unconscious, yada yada. I'm the only one. You know what I'm getting at. People love to ramble on about that kind of thing. But yeah, I'd say that's my main takeaway throughout is we really don't know anything. And so, throughout, like I thought we had it more figured out going into it. But no, it really is like it's extreme personalities in academia all the way to the top, right? It's all humans that want to feel big and important, arguing with each other all the way up to the top. Even the really fucking smart people. Like I'm TAing a class right now for someone named Dr. Unruh, William Unruh. He has stuff named after him in quantum field theory, like important theoretical predictions. And he is such a strange, esoteric dinosaur of a man. I love him. Don't get me wrong, he's hilarious. But like, like if the world was run by people like this, the world would collapse. You know what I'm saying?
I'm not sure what you're getting to, Mass. Would you mind elaborating a little bit?
Well, I think academics in general are, let's quick recalibrate, are very, very passionate about a single subject, especially up to that high level. Like becoming a professor, like if you want to become a professor in a topic, you have to go through so goddamn much. You have to suffer for so long, and it's suffering. It continues to be suffering all the way up to the top. Like as a professor, you're constantly overloaded and inundated with administrative bullshit and meetings, and you have to watch over students, and you have to teach classes, and there's marking, and there's planning courses, and there's all this shit. And if you actually want to get up to that level, but that's also like the only way to really get up to a high level where you are in a research leadership position and you are actively directing research and coming up with ideas and like leading a field. If you are willing to suffer through all of that just to get to that point, you better want to really, really be in that position. And if you really, really want to be in that position and you are willing to suffer like that, then there's probably something wrong with you because it's really unhealthy, is what I'm getting at.
There. Based on this dynamic, is that what you think have things like what you said, being inundated with menial tasks? Do you think it's just the passing of the torch? I did this, therefore you do this?
I think that a lot of it is that, yeah. I think there is, I will say that I love to nitpick, and that's, I don't know, I'm probably being a little facetious and condescending in my own biases there, but I will say that there is a paradigm shift that I've seen in people being a little more acknowledging that, like, we need to work together and not necessarily just offload things downwards like that, and that, it's more productive for everybody if we try and figure out more sustainable ways to get people to work. not just overloading people with homework. Like, because especially like as, undergraduate at that level when you're doing research, it is all the menial tasks get shoved down onto you. You are the number crunching monkey that does all the boring analysis shit that nobody else wants to do. You make all the giant Excel spreadsheets that you send to someone else who, actually looks at them and knows knows their shit.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I think a lot of it is just that. It's like, well, that's just how it is. It's the culture of academia,
Hmm. So, with everything you've been through college and undergrad and now a teaching aid, where do you hope this will go?
So I'm currently getting my master's up in Vancouver, British Columbia, in astrophysics, going into the field of space debris. I don't entirely know where I want to go after this. I know I'm going to finish this master's, of course. I want to get a doctorate at some point in my life, just because I want to be Dr. Sky. Like that's too perfect of an astrophysicist name. It's like an automatic pop science name. um, and I do really want to contribute. Like, I do want to make substantial contributions, like to the field of the research somehow. Write a few good ass papers, like get some citations, do something. But after that, I don't really know. I'm pretty open. I flirted with the idea of becoming a professor, but as I talked about before, there's all that administrative crap that you have to deal with it. I really don't know if that's worth it. But if I end up in an institute where it's different, like I know not a lot of European places are a lot more chill, in terms of how much work they dole out onto people. If I end up over there sometime and I end up liking it, then sure, I am happy to, because I really do love teaching. Teaching is something I'm very, very passionate about. And so if I were in the position where I could do that and lead research without having to kill myself and not have time to do anything else that I wanted to, then I would gladly take that.
Now, did you know from the start you liked teaching, or is that something you found over time?
It's definitely something I found over time. I was not a big fan of like doing presentations and stuff early on, like especially in high school. Like, I mean, everybody hates high school presentations. Let's be real. But when you get to a sort of academic level, like it was around like our sort of fourth, fourth year in the honors physics program, where you get classes where you actually have to start presenting to your peers and, talking about physics at like a bit of a higher level. When you're in an environment where people are actually like all respectfully listening to you, I really do enjoy it. Like, not just being the teacher, but also just in general, like that whole environment of like knowledge sharing, like everybody actually respectfully agreeing to like want to learn something. Like, that just makes me so happy when I see something like that happen. And so it was sort of a discovered love for teaching, where I was like, huh. I realized, because I had some really shitty professors going through my undergrad, like a couple. I realized, like, huh, I'm pretty good at explaining things to my friends, and I realized maybe I could be better than some of these professors, like teaching, topics that are lower than where I'm at. And so that sort of snowballed a bit, and I really do enjoy like presenting, and I've thought a lot about, my own diction and how I present myself in conference talks and yada yada stuff like that. I think it's important to maintain a sort of conversational tone when you're giving talks and teaching, and yeah, it was very much a discovered love though as I got into it.
I remember I heard from somewhere, and I'm going to paraphrase this terribly, so don't kill me. But like you, the audience.
Okay.
But I remember hearing from somewhere, a test of how well you've mastered a subject is not in how well you know it, but how well you teach it.
Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. I think the more ways that you can explain something, because like when you explain something to people, you're forced to break it down to a bit of a lower level. You're forced to break things down into digestible chunks. You have to rephrase information for different people so that they get it. When you're doing all of that stuff, like, I don't know, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know exactly how neuronal pathways reinforce each other and all that stuff. but I'm pretty sure that there's no better way to reinforce your memory than by that, re-expressing it in multiple different avenues
Mm.
consistently and being forced to recall it yourself.
Mm. So now I have another question for you that makes me curious. How'd you go from data science research and teaching into the last album with drugs, furries, and trips? I'm curious how it led to that
Yeah.
huge contrast and
So-
difference.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
It is. Well, like I said, my music, the evolution of my music coincides with the evolution of my personality, 100%. And like the summer between finishing undergrad and starting grad school, that summer specifically, I did so many psychedelics. It was amazing. But like prior to that, like a couple years before that, was the first time I tried shrooms. And do you mind if I talk about like psychedelics a bunch?
Go for it.
Okay. So a couple years before that was the first time I tried shrooms, and I had not like a drinking problem, but I did drink a lot before that, like in university, as university students do, and that just made me want to stop drinking and want to get off my ass and do all the shit that I was putting off for so long, like getting a driver's license and like I was kind of going, like I was in school in university because that was the thing to do. It's just go into university so I could have an external schedule still pressuring me doing things. Um, but that first shroom trip is one of the things that really opened me up to like, okay, nah, maybe physics is actually worth like understanding a little more. Like maybe this is worth embodying a little harder.
Hmm.
And so in general, that first trip was really eye-opening in terms of just general motivation and, want to better myself. So I stopped drinking completely after that. Um, and yeah, I don't drink much anymore. And it's just psychedelics make me want to be better, make me want to be a better person. And so over time, in the following years, I indulged in that more and more. And harkening back to when I said the subjective human experience, I learned to give that a lot more breathing room because I think that that experience, being able to, I mean, psychedelics themselves are a very uniquely human thing, right? Like we can only, our mammalian brains are the only things that are capable of processing those chemicals and, imparting that on the conscious experience. I mean, other animals can trip as well, but like, there's no way to learn how to appreciate your subjective experience than by having it like obliterated.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
I actually
And so,
actually don't know what you mean. I've never been on shrooms or psychedelics at all.
okay. So it's if if I can to briefly describe, I suppose, what
Mm.
and why because I treat it with a lot of reverence, honestly, like the psychedelic experience. Like taking shrooms for me is always like a deeply like spiritual thing. And not everybody treats that way, and that's fine. But it's the primary thing that psychedelics do is they suppress your long-term memories. This is known as ego dissolution, and when it happens to its like full extent, and you can't remember like your own name and how to speak and shit, that's referred to as ego death, colloquially. That's when you experience like the sensation of like not understanding who you are anymore, as if you were just a lone consciousness, just stripped of an identity. And that kind of, it's terrifying and it can be very traumatic if you're not expecting to go through that experience or you don't want to. But if you're adequately prepared for it, that sort of peeling back of the layers, it starts to dissociate like your thoughts, I guess, from your, oh, not dissociate, it starts to disconnect, I think, your thoughts sort of from your identity, right? You have that inner head voice, you're in a monologue, but the concept of you starts to make less and less sense. And you start to just be like you're forced into the present. It's not being mindful. It's literally being removed from your past. And so I think that has like that can confer a lot of the same benefits as just general like trying to be more mindful, trying to be more present, and it can do it a lot more rapidly if you do that like in a safe therapeutic setting, right?
Mm.
But there's always potential for misuse, especially just doing shrooms in your basement with your friends. That's is that going to confer long-term psychological benefits? Probably not. Maybe. Depends on exactly, what you talk about afterwards and all that. But I think, yeah, I started doing psychedelics a lot more, and that opened me up to being just a less judgmental person in general, and a more emotionally, emotionally open, more willing to experience things emotionally and not so analytically, like a physicist, constantly objectifying and deconstructing the world. Because humans, they're not meant to do that. Like we didn't evolve for any specific purpose, much less to do anything like that. Our brains are not wired for any specific reason. Why would they be wired to neatly deconstruct the world and for us to just be chill with that? It's foolish to think you can shirk your own subjective experience and shove off your emotions.
That's a pretty interesting take.
And so,
I appreciate the insights.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, of course.
how has these experiences led you to writing the album, the one you're working on now, may I ask?
So, this is another album that's been in the works for like an ashamedly long time. Since I started working on this one right after Starbreath came out, which was in 2022. Yeah, I think it was September 2022. I already had some riffs in mind and stuff, and I was already kind of flirting with the idea of this neon jungle. But it was never really fully nailed down until like a year and a half later when I graduated. That summer when I was tripping and I saw Birdsatan perform at Virality. That's when I sort of really went back, revisited, nailed down the idea of what the neon jungle means to me, because the album means Tales from the Neon Jungle. And so originally I just conceptualized it as the place where you go when you trip. You go to the neon jungle. But that's a cool concept, sure. Let's roll with that. Because I've had a couple experiences like that were very like earthy, jungly looking, that kind of fascinated me and stuck with me in terms of like hallucination. And I was like, that's beautiful. I want to try and capture that a bit. I thought that was a good metaphor for tripping. And later on, I started to expand upon that to not just be tripping per se, but the neon jungle became a bit more of like a whole metaphor for like the conscious mind. Like there's a lot more exploration happening in the album, I suppose, than just doing psychedelics, right? Like there's also my time in the furry fandom, and there's some other fun psychonautical undertakings that get into later that I kind of get into on this album, like lucid dreaming and all that. But it all comes back to this sort of like human subjective experience. Like these are things that only we can really do, and like we have the privilege of doing them because we are a bunch of molecules that are like self-organizing, and we only got that for so long. So like we might as well take advantage of it. We have no idea what consciousness is. Like there's no equations that can describe how consciousness arises or how a conscious being will behave. We don't know why it arises, right? Is it like an evolutionary trait? Is it inherently advantageous, or is it just a byproduct of how our brains evolved? I have no idea, but it does allow us to experience a lot of crazy shit that I think it's important to appreciate.
So with the songs on the album, what made you select those specifically and put them in the order they're in?
So, the songs on this album. So this one starts with So the whole thing, I guess, is sort of a tour of the Neon Jungle.
Mm.
It's a lot more of a coherent story than my previous albums were. This one sort of follows like an unnamed protagonist, and some of the songs even have lyrics, and the lyrics tell a story about this protagonist. Mostly from a first-person perspective, and it follows the perspective of somebody who would be tripping, like on some kind of substance, acid or shrooms, and they are taking a visit to the Neon Jungle, and the different songs, like different locations, different experiences that, are sort of, that for me, are personally linked with psychedelics.
Hmm.
And the song order was sort of arbitrary in the beginning, but then it sort of, I sort of shuffled things around a bit, and now I have it where I'm pretty happy. And it sort of starts off as like an introduction to just the Neon Jungle. What are some psychedelic noises? So I'm also in this album. I'm planning on creating a full procedural wavetable. Like, I don't know the exact term for this. I don't even know exactly what you'd call this, but like an artificial jungle soundscape with a lot of synthesized animal noises and stuff like that to fill in the silence and gaps in the album between songs. I'm planning on doing that, and so the first song is going to be showcasing that, seeing how I can musically use that, and just introducing the concept of the Neon Jungle. And the very first song, yeah, that song is called Hypnagogia, and it's inspired by hypnagogia, like entering, a hypnagogic state, a state where you're super hyper suggestible and prone to all these strange, delirious thoughts and hallucinations. So that's another state of mind that's always kind of fascinated me. I mean, so exploring different states of consciousness. That's one of them that I decided to lead with. And it's sort of doubled because it's spelt hypnagogia instead of hypnagogia. And so it's sort of alluding to the fact that the person who is tripping is starting to become entranced by what they're seeing. They're starting to get sucked into the experience, as you often do with psychedelics on the come up. There's sort of like a tipping point where you're like on the roller coaster and it kicks in. And so that first one sort of alludes to that. The next song after that is called Sylvie's song. I'll actually leave the lore for that one for now until the end because it's a bit of an outlier. The next one after that is Tapestry of the Wisp. That's a heavier one because this starts to get into more emotionally challenging experiences, I guess, because psychedelics are definitely not all fun, and bad trips happen, and emotionally challenging experiences happen. But I've never personally not had, a bad trip or an emotionally challenging experience while on psychedelics that didn't lead to a lot of personal growth afterwards. It was always for a purpose. It was some facet of my behavior or some anxiety that was maybe unfounded that I needed to critically examine, that was sort of forced in front of me in my perspective. And so Tapestry of the Wisp sort of starts to dig into that. It starts to dig into a bit of like delusion, like that you might experience while because if you're a very paranoid person, right, you hold a lot of, say, anxious thoughts about people, and you trip while you're in that state of mind, that's going to be very strongly amplified. And so Tapestry of the Wisp sort of speaks to that phenomenon of emotional intensification in a negative way, where you're like, you feel all these strong emotions and they're leading you to this place, but you don't know what. You're desperately trying to reach some logical conclusion in your thoughts, but you have no idea why or what, and it's just stressing you the fuck out. And in this case, the protagonist is following the tapestry of the wisp. The wisp is this thing that's trying to lead them along that they can never quite grasp. It's the sort of allegory for, this logical conclusion that you feel like you're constantly reaching for that you're never actually going to reach. And so there's that one, and then that song is where I start to get real synthy as well, because I've been delving into a lot of like synthwave, EDM, progressive metal type stuff. So the end of that song starts to delve a little more into that, and then we go into a full like EDM focused track called Neon Predator, which is again about emotionally challenging experiences. This time, though, the Neon Predator is my sort of personification of a bad trip in general, the emotionally challenging experience itself. So, not a delusion, not your own emotions, but like you realizing that there might actually be something wrong with you, or you, like, that moment where you reflect on your own behavior and you're like, yeah, I was actually the asshole in all of these situations, and I need to like come to terms with that,
Mm.
right? It's that kind of vibe. And the way that's portrayed in The Neon Predator, this one has lyrics as well. Uh, it is the protagonist is going through the neon jungle. They just, they just got through their ordeal with the wisp, and now they can feel something drawing closer. They don't know what, but the neon jungle is getting brighter and more overstimulating to them. And that's the Neon Predator. That's what he does. As he gets closer, the jungle gets brighter and it becomes more and more anxious and all this stuff. And so that song builds up into a big fat breakdown where the protagonist has a full on panic attack and doesn't know what to do. And then from there, it sort of mellows out and it talks about a lot of acceptance and sort of it's the moment in the trip where you're like, I am stuck in this, so the best I can do is surrender and sort of actually critically examine these thoughts. Like there's a moment of catharsis where you really start to reach out and examine your own, behavior patterns and whether or not they need to change. And that's what the latter half of that song is about, is transitioning from the panic, from the oh my god, to the okay, it's not all bad, I can fix this.
Mm.
Yeah, and then from there, there's a couple others. There's Peculiar Hollow, a song I wrote with Leica. The Peculiar Hollow is another place in the Neon Jungle that is deserving of its own little tour, which is it's another genre mashup song I have. This one doesn't necessarily. This one's sort of inspired by a mishmash of experiences, psychedelic experiences, as sort of evidenced by how genre mashup-y it is. But it just talks about, well, it doesn't talk about anything, it's instrumental, but it's written and inspired about sort of just strange experiences you have that we can't explain yet. Like in general, like how there's a lot of sort of psychedelic guitar work in that one and bits that sort of repeat and a lot of flanging and a lot of wah, and it's just a bit of a stretch to say it's a proper abstraction of, things that we can't comprehend or explain, or like consciousness. But that's sort of where I was going when that's sort of what I had in mind when I did that one, was sinking into the conscious mind and coming to terms with the fact that we don't know much of anything. And yeah, there's that one, and then there's Foxtail, which is that's the final one, and that song is a bit more of that song's more of like a summary of the entire album, that describes the protagonist from an outside perspective of what just happened during their trip. It's a little shorter, and it kind of just talks about like, because like in actuality, what happened is somebody dropped acid in the bathroom at a party, and the whole album is what the fuck they just experienced. And at the end, it's gonna be more like describing what actually happened. They dropped acid in the bathroom. They went outside. It was like the middle of the night. They were running around in like the middle of the street. It's gonna be a little more like, emotionally poignant than how I'm wording it right now, but it's that kind of deal.
Mm.
I think that's all of them.
Wow, it sounds like an amazing, surreal, and very poetic. I see what you mean by the poetic aspect of what you're writing, hearing the whole thing.
It's very yeah, it's my time to be and especially in academia, day job, scientist, you speak concisely. You word things as objectively and nicely as possible. It's my time to relax that restriction and use as much vocabulary as I actually have.
How do you balance the two worlds between the artistic, poetic, and musical, and then the analytical, data-driven, and research you do? How do you balance the two well enough?
I think it's important to find some kind of aesthetic motivation in your research. Like if you do a very 'cause I'm involved in very technical mathematical bullshit. But it's also really cool. Like I study up until now I've studied black holes and accretion physics. Like even though the math and the actual day-to-day work is just staring at graphs and tables of numbers, it's still really fucking cool to think about the fact that I'm studying a black hole that just devoured, a Mars-sized chunk of a star within our galaxy, a few kiloparsecs away. And so it's always important to take a step back and big picture and like I said, aesthetic motivation. I think it's really cool that I get to study black holes and accretion physics because I can visualize what that looks like. There's cool art of black holes. We could simulate things like this and we can get pretty videos and shit of all gas inflows and accretion disk simulations and that's really cool. And likewise, just a bunch of other fields of astrophysics that get really pretty images and galaxies, observational galaxy stuff, looking at them with telescopes, space telescopes. Fuck, that's super cool. And so I think using that, I know people in the field who are very theory driven and really don't give a shit about taking pictures and don't really care about that side of anything, and I don't understand. I don't know how you how you're happy like that. I mean, if you are, that's awesome. More power to you. But yeah, I've always been one to try and do that. And then I guess likewise, right, with my music, right, it sort of comes the other way, right? I've learned all these fun technical skills from academia and being a physicist. And so that means I get to apply those in my own music making. Like I said, right, when I have these emotional abstract ideas, now I also have these fun technical tools that I can play with and see how I can get them to sound. Right? So I have a fun baseline idea in my music, which I guess, yeah, this is interesting. I've never really fully conceptualized this, but I have my music is very I'll come up with an idea, a vague musical idea in my head that I'm this would be great. And I don't fully have it nailed down. It's just maybe sort of a melody or some chunk of a harmony. But from there, right, it's about recording a little chunk of it and then extending it and then actually making it sound good. And now that I have all these fun technical tools from academia, well, that's great. I have the know-how to become a better mixing engineer and actually understand how humans perceive audio, for example. I've been getting a lot into obscure old mixing techniques and shit recently because of that. And it's been very, very satisfying. So I'd say I balance them by, I guess, intertwining the two, I suppose.
Okay. And now you said that when you first saw Vrchat play at Virality, you revisited your album and it reinvigorated you in a sense. Now, what did you do with that reinvigoration? Did you just go back to the album and do it, or did you end up doing more shows? Did you play anything here in VR after that?
So I first went back to that album and was okay, I need to clarify the vision for this and actually figure out, okay, how many songs do I want on it and get that all nailed down. So I had a list of stuff to work on as opposed to constantly being in the ideas stage, because that's very hard as an artist who's when you're fully responsible for yourself. Because I don't have bandmates or there's very little accountability as a solo artist, right? I'm sure y'all might be able to relate. And that lack of accountability, you need to come up with a way to conquer that. you know. And so I did. I tried to come up with that list and stick to it, and so that's what I've been doing so far. I have those songs that I've laid out. I'm actually working on them, and I'm like digging into the ideas. Um, and yeah, so that was one. That was like the primary thing, was just getting back on track, acting more like a musician, like being more upfront. Like, I make music. Would you like to hear it? And not being ashamed or like feeling bad about saying that to people when they expressed interest in in having a conversation about music, because I always hated being that guy who like interjected with, "Oh, I make this," but like it comes there also comes a point when people say that your music is good and that they want to hear it, and that you just kind of have to be like, okay, I guess empirically I'm a good artist to some people. And so, you yeah, I started doing that more, and I've been playing some shows in VR. I've been wanting to do more of that. I played a friend's birthday, and I played the Furry Hideout New Year's Countdown for Corbell. Some VRLium events that I'm gonna be participating in shortly, and some others, some things will be on the radar.
Mm, okay. Now, what about Bird Satan's show inspired you? And when you started doing the other shows yourself, like Beryllium, Corbell, the Furry Hideout, what were those experiences like to you with that new invigoration? You felt kind of hitting the thing hard.
It was really exciting. I think so. One of the things I realized there, like when I saw Bird performing, was, well, the big thing I realized immediately was like, okay, wait, there is an audience for this. Like, I could be playing guitar in VR chat. That's such a cool thing that I could be doing for people. So I was like, okay, yes, we have to do that. Um, but I think from my experience, like getting into it, I kind of realized like, okay, there's the whole like daydreaming, right? You can sit and you can daydream about what you want to do in the future, and for me, that was always performing in front of people. But there comes a point where you actually have to knuckle down and understand what goes into it and start doing it for real. And like, there's all that scary unknown that sort of builds this resistance in your mind of like, it's daunting. There's all the shit you have to learn to get into, and like all these little technical skills you have to pick up on the side, and it's just stressful. I'm gonna be honest. Performing in VR, like trackers, guitar, and then having all the shit running on your computer at the same time, and just it's a very stressful environment,
Mm.
and it's tough. It's not tough as in you should feel bad for me, like we do this to ourselves as musicians, but like it's tough
Mm.
as in like there's a lot of shit, it's stressful, and it's all of that stuff that you don't hear about that from our favorite artists. You don't hear about how fucking stressful the performance was, because as a performer your job is to put on a good show and make it look effortless.
Mm.
um and so I guess just, yeah, all that background stuff was a lot more like, I don't know. I've been interested in it though. Like that, learning to embrace that, I think has been important though. Like that invigoration was sort of part of that, was learning to embrace that, because for the longest time it was daydreaming about performing, but not really understanding what went into it. But when I got that invigoration, it was like, okay, well, let's finally understand all the little nitty-gritty details of what goes into a performance, like performing in VR. And learning that it was a very like, I mean, this seems kind of naive to like say, but like looking looking back in hindsight, but learning how like cobbled together everything is in terms of like people performing in VR. Like there's nobody else doing this. Like the people who perform live music in VR are the people who are, for the most part, making assets for all the instruments and trying to come up with systems to make it look like you're playing those instruments and all that stuff. And it's very much a patchwork of like sharing little ideas with each other and collaborating in terms of like asset creation. And that was something that I didn't really think about, before getting into it, but I've enjoyed actually quite a lot.
Mm. when you said performing is stressful, I had many conversations you had with performers like yourself come up, and I'm gonna paraphrase when Snake sings. I'm sorry, dude. I'm gonna butcher this really badly, but the sentiment is when you go on stage and you're not stressed out, you're doing something wrong. It is when you're stressed out, you're able to give the best show possible due to being stressed. You're paying attention to everything. You're trying to make sure everything is the way it should be. If you go in with some sort of ego, this is going to be perfect. How could you see the bigger picture? I hope I'm getting that right. For the love of God, I hope I got that right.
I agree with that for the most part. I think there's an important distinction between like I don't think it's necessary to be stressed because, for example, like in terms of teaching, like this. Okay, so this draws on my own experience, and this is probably gonna be very different from Snake's, but I think that teaching, like teaching, presenting, and playing guitar, performing, I think that those scratch the same, those satisfy the same desire in my brain to be the positive center of attention of a room. Right? Like primally. Like that is a good feeling. That is immediate positive feedback. And I know for a fact that I teach best when I'm very relaxed, and I've gotten a lot better at that over the years just because I'm much more used to operating in that environment. Like I'm a lot more used to being myself in front of a crowd of people, and that just being like an okay thing. Like I've kind of I generally think of myself as a decent teaching assistant. And like I said, I like to teach. I enjoy pedagogy and understanding how people understand things and stuff. And so I think being relaxed, be relaxed, but I don't know. It's like it'd be the right amount of relaxed. I don't think stressed is necessarily the right word.
Well-
Don't be stressed. Yeah. It just kind of, I guess, comes down to just English as well. So I'm nitpicking a bit.
I probably also butchered that really badly, so I'm going to say that too. Maybe using this AI would be fun.
Hello, user. You appear to be searching for the Metaverse Degen.
Oh, great. I think it's broken. You know the link. Just look at metaversedegen.card.co. There should be something over there for you to enjoy.
Lion and Raptor. Consume content. Join the cult.
Did it just say cult? Okay. Yeah, no, we're cutting this before this gets weird. Just go to the link. You know, it's right down there somewhere. All right. Bye. And a huge thanks to those who have subscribed to our Patreon, such as Niche, Future Oracle, Aliquum, Forbidden Zero, and Frozen. Thank you all very much for being there.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, I guess to briefly outline that belief, yeah, I think you should. I think there's one quote that I have, which is "Play exciting, not excited." I can't remember who originally said that. It was some jazz musician from the 30s, 40s, sometime around that era. But you know, channel, like relax and like get into that flow state. I think there is a real performer's zen. Like there is definitely, like, being up on stage, while it is stressful, it's definitely, you get into like a state of just existing like that. And I love that. Like when you get into that kind of flow state of just being comfortable while performing and like taking things as they come, because that's when you are at your best, is when you're relaxed and you are able to handle stressors as they come, right? So keeping yourself mentally relaxed like that while still engaged and present, I think that's the goal to be worked towards in terms of performance.
Okay.
But I do very much agree with the comments on, like, if you come in with an ego, expect, like, wanting everything to be perfect, then it's not going to be.
Well, I don't think it's wanting everything to be perfect. I think the sentiment was going up knowing everything is going to be perfect, in the sense of like...
Sorry, no, yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, not like the whole, I hope things are right.
I see.
It's like going in wanting to give the best performance versus going up knowing you're going to give the best performance, I believe. is the starker contrast, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going to describe two
at the end of
different
the day,
kinds.
you give the performance you give.
Okay, fair enough. By the way, Stick,
Yeah,
I'm very, very sorry I put that on to you. I don't know if it was you or not, or even if I got that correct.
Yeah, I hope I'm bad makes for no reason right now, and it wasn't even him who said this. No,
Honestly, there's a very high chance I'm mixing up multiple conversations into one, so that could also be a thing.
No, okay, we'll stop attributing this to snakes and just in general talk
Yeah.
about this concept, I suppose.
Yeah, no,
Um,
no, I'm just kind of making fun of
yeah.
myself a little bit there. That's all that
No, I
last bit was.
I gotcha. But
Mm.
yeah, I think like yeah. So
Mm.
which is better in this situation, wanting to give or knowing you're going to give your best performance?
Wanting to give, I guess, is the direction.
Wanting's the better one. Yeah, okay. Then I agree with that.
I
Yeah.
won't answer
You
that.
go in
I
that
won't
way.
answer that.
What do you mean?
Because most of the time I shoot it from the hip, and hopefully my ass doesn't hit the pavement on the way out the door.
I mean, if you're trying to give your best performance, then whatever you gave was your best performance, and you know you gave your best performance. But I'm also just kind of a semantic stem tard, so.
Fair enough. You know, us.
Sure, you're trying to say, Sky, your ass has hit the floor more than once. Okay, got that. No problem.
Sure, yeah. You know, you can't be afraid to fail. That's true. If that's what
Yep.
that entails.
Yep, pretty much what that means. Yes.
So I have a question. What was your first show like after once you got inspired to like be a musician? When you stood up on stage in front of people, what was it like? What happened, and what were your thoughts?
So I have the VR shows, like the first VR shows that I started doing recently. I have also done some smaller in-person gigs before that whole Finding Bird experience and all that. So to talk about those, the in-person ones beforehand were always like quite small. Invited to some festival. My favorite was getting invited to a parkour festival out in the woods, like 6
Oh.
hours away. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Getting to play for just a bunch of hippies in a field in the woods under some scaffolding, like that was kind of chill. But it was never anything that got me in contact with like other actual like musicians that I like wanted to like artistically progress with. You know what I mean? And so yeah, then when I got into VRChat, that's again where I was sort of surrounded more by other musicians, and that's what kind of pushed me into that. And then yeah, getting up on the first time I played was at a friend's birthday party. It was incredibly fun. Okay, this is something about performing that nobody tells you. You need to like minimize your settings, turn off everybody's avatar, lower your streaming bitrate if you're playing wirelessly to as slow as it'll or as low as it'll go, so that your experience of the show is awful, so that everybody else's is better. That's kind of hilarious to me, just how like you're watching your favorite performer up on stage, but in reality they've probably got like 16 pixels in their headset and listening to like a voice chat full of people like screaming at them in like a click track and shit. But it was really fun. That first one was a smaller show. I played for about it was like 30 40 people. But it was really fun just being in that, like having like control over a crowd, like everybody being actively engaged in your music, and me actually having like me being a more confident guitar player, and being able to play in VR. It was exhilarating, and it really had me like addicted to that shit. Like right away, I was like, "Oh yeah, we have to do more of this. Like this has to be something I do more of." And yeah, from there, I really want to up the ante. So like at the furry hideout, I also experimented with all those funny procedural visuals that I generated from the music with code, and I want to do more of that. I want to experiment more with the medium of VR. The fact that we have, full audio-visual control for an experience.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was really fun. The first show was hella fun.
I'm sure it was fun. Now, I'm curious, what was the parkour show like? This sounds like a very unique experience.
Yeah, that was so earlier on in my life, like I was really into that was my way of getting out of gym class in middle and high school because school's really full. So if you did something outside of school, they'd let you out, and I did parkour. Why not? And um, I knew the guy who coached for like the local whatever. I don't even there was like an actual parkour gym that opened in my city shortly thereafter. But like guy who coached a lot of it and was big involved in that community had some land out in some sketchy ass town. I live in the middle of prairies in Canada. Well, lived, sorry, in the middle of prairies in Canada around then. And he had some land out in some sketchy ass town, or like out in or, like the outskirts of it. And he went there and he got an RV and was like, "I'm gonna host a parkour festival out here." And sure, why not? It's called the Jungle Jam. And so I rolled up there with his dad in the big ass van full of shit to run this festival, and yeah, it was camping out in the middle of fucking nowhere in the prairies, and my show itself was quite fun. It was sun setting. It was a bunch of drunk people, a bunch of high people around a bunch of scaffolding that was set up for the parkour part of it. I was like underneath that, and there's like a big tent where like the DJ booth stuff was. So I had my laptop in there, and it was just me, guitar, and like a fire next to me that I could jump around. And yeah, I've played a bunch of my older stuff. That was before Cosmic Drive had come out, so um, I was in general less confident about performing around that time. I didn't really have as much stuff that I was as proud of in the sense of like I could show people and be like confident that this is good in some way. So yeah, that was really fun. That whole experience was interesting. I don't know, I've had a lot of strange little experiences like that that contribute to a whole, but I think most artists do.
Mm. So, what was the show that you were most proud of what you were showcasing, or may I ask?
Mm. I'd probably say the last Furry Hideout. 'Cause I haven't done that many shows in VR yet. But I'd say the last one at the Furry Hideout, the New Year's countdown, where I got to show off all those procedurally generated visuals. That was really fun, and I teased a song off of Tales from the Neon Jungle as well. Tapestry of the Wisp. I played the instrumental for that one, and so all in all, I think that was my most banging set to date. I was also just I don't know, the guitar. I feel like I played that one particularly well. It comes and goes. Some days you mess up the thing that you've never messed up before. But I think the most recent one. I'm looking forward into getting into more though. I have a full hour show lined up at a place called the Midnight Opera in VR in March, and so that'll be fun having time to develop something a little more. I also have a couple months to actually work on that one because like the the New Year's hideout, the New Year's countdown at the hideout, that event. I only got confirmation that I was playing at that like 6 days beforehand, and so uh, that was Christmas break when I was at home with my family without my guitar for most of it. So it's a good thing that I had rehearsed beforehand on the off chance that I was going to get called up to perform. um, but I had my laptop with me, so I spent that week making all those visuals and stuff, and that was a lot of fun. And I really look forward to doing more of that. I really like just the whole audio visual sensory experience. Which I guess, that's kind of Tales from the Neon Jungle, psychedelics. Makes sense. So I'm gonna be doing more of that.
Mm. So, may I ask, is that what's going to be next for you? What is coming in the future?
Yeah, so Tales from the Neon Jungle is the first thing that I'm really trying to get done right now. I'm aiming to have that done for October, November of this year. It's a long one. It's gonna be coming out around an hour, which is the longest album I've ever put out.
Oh wow.
And then there's the things involved with putting out an album, like, getting cover. I really want to. So there's a couple singles that I want to drop as well, and I'd like to get nice cover art for each one, from different artists that I like. See how much of that I can actually do. But aside from that, there's also some collaborative efforts. Like I said, I introduced myself to Satan after I saw him perform, and we like to spitball ideas, and there's some things that we're cooking up slowly for afterwards. Namely a track on a longer track describing the birth of a star and then the death of said star. It's like the life cycle.
Hmm.
Be a single, like 20-minute long song. But yeah, mostly that. That and grinding on my masters. I'm going into researching space debris and how debris clouds around planets evolve over time.
Oh wow. Sounds like you're quite ambitious with what's coming. I'm actually pretty excited to see what comes out, may I ask. And what made you choose space debris as well?
So, oh man, okay. Brief little aside. Academia, this is part of why I don't want to stay in academia, because I couldn't go into what I actually wanted to. I want to do cosmology and galaxy evolution and shit like that. That's what really interests me the most, like inherently or intrinsically, I should say. But um, the professors that I wanted to work with in that realm didn't have funding to take me on. One of them was just kind of a dick and didn't show up to several meetings that we had scheduled. For one reason or another, I couldn't stay in that subfield. So I talked to a bunch of other professors, and this one guy, Dr. Aaron Boley, he he does mostly like he does half like planetary formation and evolutions, like how do planets form around stars and stuff like that. And the other half of his research is on space sustainability and that like space policy informing and shit like that. And so at first that didn't really catch my attention. I talked to him about the planetary formation stuff because I was like, well, I could, study how planets form in disks. That's cool. But then he talked about that whole project, which is what I'm going to be getting involved with, which is simulating how debris clouds around planets formed by space junk and satellites and all that, how that evolves over time as maneuvering systems fail and micrometeorites fly in and damage things, right? Satellites get busted up into smaller pieces. How does that evolve over time? And what is that going to look like for us in the future? Because satellites are currently a completely unregulated industry. If you have the money to launch a satellite, you can do it. There's no greater regulatory body that's keeping tabs on who has what orbiting the Earth. And so it's just become like a really hip thing for humans to do, especially economically. Like it's kind of it's a thing you can do to attract investors. It's a buzzword. You can launch something into space. And that really frustrates me because that's going to have dire consequences in the future, right? And that's part of what my research is going to be delving into is what are those dire consequences? Are we fucked? How long do we have until we're fucked? That kind of stuff. And I realized that this does very strongly align with me because I really don't like that humans don't think about the consequences of their actions very well. Like, it's all... I did a literature review on this topic recently to start preparing for my work, and I was very taken aback at how much of the work on this subject, space debris and keeping low Earth orbit clear, is pure economic cost out analysis. How much of the writing, like the academic writing on this subject, is optimizing the business of launching satellites and trying to find some sort of trade-off that preserves human economic growth with not fucking up the earth too bad. But whether or not it's not fucking up the earth too bad is kind of up for debate because most of these a large body of the literature I've seen uses very, very simple like probabilistic models to determine how these satellite clouds like evolve and disregards a lot of the physics of what's actually happening up there. And so, as much as I really want to go into like the big shit, black holes, galaxy evolution and stuff, I also feel very morally obligated to take a step back and assist in humanity's, you know, not destroy assist in humanity not destroying itself for a couple of years. And then maybe go back into the others, the other bigger stuff afterwards if I want to.
It seems like a very noble goal, I think, and also to get where you want to go, sometimes getting your foot in the door is a really good place to be. Sometimes being in the
Yeah,
room with can help you network to get to where you're initially be, but also at least with what you're doing now is leaving a very noble thing behind you as you get there.
absolutely, yeah. And I still think like it's still interesting to me. Like I'm a computer nerd. I like coding and simulations and all that kind of stuff. That's sort of where my strengths lie. And so this still definitely fits my bill of getting to code, take physics and translate it into code, and you know all the things that entails. So I'm still happy to be involved in this project. It does still interest me in an intrinsic
Mm.
sense.
Okay. So since I'm pretty dumb on the subject, what kinds of things happen with space debris and that we should look out for, may I ask? What are some of the things you're researching and finding?
So I did. So okay. So I am just getting into this field, so I
Yeah.
can only speak so much on the exact specifics. But
Fair enough.
I will say that the problem of space debris. Well, one big thing, right? Currently, I don't know the exact number. I want to say it's on the order of a few thousand satellites in low Earth orbit right now. I can't remember the exact number. I want to say it's like 4,200 around there. Um, just in low Earth orbit. So, you know, up to a couple hundred kilometers away. And SpaceX, everybody's favorite private space company, wants to launch 42,000 Starlink satellites over the next few decades
Holy shit.
in low Earth orbit to blanket the entire Earth with broadband internet. And it's like, yeah, theoretically, they could do that and we could be fine. Like, people could maneuver their satellites out of the way. That's a thing that happens already. Most satellites have maneuvering systems that keep them from colliding. But the problem is that space debris actually falling back to Earth and becoming a problem for us lags the industry by a few hundred years, right? And there's a lot of like we all assume like when we design some maneuvering system like that, it's sort of a band-aid solution because it doesn't like there's no promise that that maneuvering system is going to last the entire lifetime of the satellite and then they're all going to function perfectly, you know? And so it's a much bigger issue than we originally thought. In terms of things are going to start falling back down to the earth. Like it already happens quite regularly. But it's going to start happening frequently enough to like cause death. Likely around 2050. That's our best estimate for when that's going to start becoming like an actual issue. And people just like I said, consequences of actions and like I think balancing human economic interests with like reality, like the Earth we live on is stupid and fallacious, and there should be a large regulatory body that is responsible for overseeing everything that goes into space.
Okay. So would some of the consequences be that we get to look forward to? Besides freighting satellites.
Yeah, so the biggest one is things are going to gradually, like everything in low Earth orbit over time, like it's a collisional environment, right? Maneuvering systems fail, there's micrometeorites. Things are going to slowly break apart and become finer, and you're going to have small shards of metal, and everything's going to become more of a fine dust, or like, sort of in the range of like like car-sized or smaller, essentially.
Mm.
And once that happens, it's hard to like get things off of the Earth, right? Imagine you have 40, right? Like I said, Starlink wants to launch 42, or SpaceX, right? They have 42,000 Starlink satellites, right? Imagine, obviously not all of those are going to fail, but imagine if they all did and they all broke up into debris that shrouded the Earth. Well, how the fuck do we get rockets through low Earth orbit now? Like, how do we get them out of the Earth's gravitational pull? Because you have all these chunks of metal flying around. So like a piece of metal orbiting around the Earth that's like 1 centimeter in radius, right? If it's roughly spherical, has the kinetic energy of a minivan driving at highway speeds. So you can imagine 30 of those slamming into the side of the rocket on its way through is not good for the rocket and really hard to deal with. And so that's probably the biggest one, is that there's a real risk that we'll seal ourselves onto the surface of the Earth
Oh,
until we figure out how to deal with space debris.
so this is a little fun little side question related. When we launch rockets now, do we have or calculations for space debris included on when, where, and how they get launched?
Typically, yes. There will be, well, usually, so right now we honestly don't have enough satellites that if you just shoot a single rocket out, like it's not a big deal.
Hmm.
Currently, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal if you are putting other satellites up there right now. Like the ISS, for example, has to perform lots of maneuvering to get out of the way of space debris that's headed its way. I believe it's on average, I think it was 4 per month. I want to say 4 per month, but it might even be 4 per week. I can't remember the exact time frame, but it has to do a lot. The ISS has to move a lot to avoid shit hitting it. And so it is a huge problem if you're involved in the satellite industry. But it currently just launching stuff like rockets, nah, it's not really a big issue. But it will be a huge issue if we don't start worrying about it.
I can understand that. Oh, so, so what about working with that professor or that specific gentleman who got you into the subject? What about the conversation with him convinced you to want to help him pursue this?
I think it was kind of, well, I mean, for one, he was just like, I got along with the guy very well. That's something that's really important in academia, is like working for somebody that you can personally like get along with well, like have a good jokey relationship with, or however you like to be socially. And so I just really like the guy. But yeah, like I said, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, man, I really don't like how people don't think about the consequences of their actions. There's very few people that are actually like doing this work right now. And so there's like space for me. Like I know I'll be funded and all that. I don't know. It kind of felt like a bit of a call to me, I suppose. As well, the previous professors that I had spoken to, the other prospective ones, like I said, one of them didn't even show up to a scheduled meeting we had. Just kind of an unpleasant dick. So meeting somebody who seemed to agree with me on a lot of things like that was very refreshing. It was like, yeah, I'd rather work for this guy who, will value me.
Well, Skye, thank you very much for letting us get to know you. My last couple of questions before we start wrapping up. First of which is the name you used in Vrchat. How'd you get it and why do you use it?
SkyeBeat. So this is the name of my persona, my full name. I came up with it many moons ago. It was middle school. Sky, because this was before I got into astrophysics. It was simply because I like to cheer people up, bring them sky high. And then Beat was because I made music. And then later on became an astrophysicist, and Sky was just perfect.
Okay. And the avatar you're in, what made you choose it? And is there anything about it that means anything to you?
Well, so I mean, it is just, Foxy Paw's base, but this is how I wear my hair. I own I mean, not this specific hoodie, but there are other things on this avatar, like this shirt that I do own in real life, or these pants that I own, or these arm sleeves that I own, or this watch that my friend got me for Christmas one year that I recreated in VR after I got it signed by a band that I like. I like recreating little things like that. Personal details.
Okay. Well, again, Sky, thank you so much for allowing us to get to hear your talent all
Yeah,
about
no
you.
doubt.
Thank you.
Of course. Of course. Oh,
Really
I appreciate you I appreciate you having this conversation with me.
Well, where can the audience find you and your work or music if they wish to reach out and find you?
Well, if you want my music, you can look up Valac, VALAC, on pretty much any streaming platform. It's the one with all the guitar, and the profile picture for most of them is a dude with his head exploding in space. And on Instagram, you can hit me up at Sky_Valac. I don't know. Yeah, that's probably the big one. There's a like a Linktree in that, so you can find other things that way if you want.
Okay. Well, all of that will be in the description for you right down that way. If you look, whether you're on your phone or you're on your computer, over in the video description of Spotify or down in the description of the video, there's a section we put in called guest links. Everything for Sky here will be in that section called guest links, as well as other things like the world we're in and everything else is right down there. It's a little fun section for you to go check out if you wish to know more. Find the person who made the world we're in, stuff like that. All of it's down there. And this is the point where I'll ask you the audience member question before we wrap things up. So with that said is, what's your favorite space fact? I'd like to know. Put it in the comments, we'll read it. With that said, Mr. Raptor, you know the thing.
You know, like, no matter what, you're in VR.
Oh, hold on. For some reason, the stream camera closed itself out.
You never know in VR when you have a friend that can't handle a camera correctly, because I can't handle one at all. But when you're roaming around and having fun, I always think back, how's this work? And if you do know how it works, pass the torch. Somebody always needs a little bit of burning, but don't burn them too hard. We'll talk to you later, folks. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Water? What? It's only ankle deep, goddammit. No, it's higher than that. It's knee deep in my case. Oh, at least I know one thing's getting cleaned. It's a stream of it all. No peeing in the pool. Oh, it's not a pool. It's just a goddamn fucking setup. I'm just a poor old raptor taking a bath because I can't afford a bathhouse. Yeah, those bastards take gold coins. I don't have gold coins. Hey, feet are wet. Wee, 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 wee. Mom's gonna be pissed. I forgot to take my coat off. She's gonna be pissed. Hey, at least I did the laundry for her. She don't have to worry about it no more.